The Mirror of Shadows. Renata had always considered herself a skeptic. Practical and rational, she rarely believed in superstitions. So when she inherited an antique mirror from her grandmother, she saw it only as an unusual but beautiful decoration. The mirror was large, with a dark wooden frame intricately carved with leaves and flowers, and the glass was slightly tarnished by time. As she hung the mirror on her bedroom wall, Renata noticed that something about it made her feel uneasy. Perhaps it was the slightly warped reflection, or the way it seemed to absorb light, casting the room in a dimmer shade. Still, she chose to ignore her discomfort. After all, it was just a mirror. On the first night after hanging it, Renata awoke to a strange sensation. The room was silent, but she felt as though she were being watched. She turned over in bed, and from across the room, she saw the mirror. In the darkness, it seemed as if her reflection was farther away, as though the mirror were showing something beyond her bedroom. Trying to dispel the fear, she closed her eyes and went back to sleep. But deep in her mind, an unsettling feeling remained. The following day, Renata tried to dismiss the unease the mirror gave her. She kept busy throughout the day, avoiding the room as much as possible. However, that night, the sensation returned. Renata felt that there was something different in the room's atmosphere, a weight that seemed to emanate directly from the mirror. She looked at it again and noticed that instead of reflecting only the darkness of the room, the mirror showed shadows in motion. It was as if a faint shape was moving behind her. Her heart pounding, Renata sat up in bed, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. She got up, cautiously approaching the mirror, running her hand across its cold surface as if expecting to feel something beyond the glass. But the mirror was simply that, a smooth, unmarked pane of glass. With a sigh, she tried to relax and return to bed, convincing herself she was imagining things. Just as she was about to turn off the light, a faint whisper emerged, quiet and indistinct. Renata froze, and the whisper seemed to come from the mirror itself, as if someone on the other side was trying to speak to her. She held her breath, paralyzed. "Can you hear me?" The voice whispered, soft but disturbingly close. Fear gripped her, and Renata remained silent, too terrified to respond. The voice returned, more insistent, but then faded, leaving only silence behind. Her heart still racing, Renata finally managed to move, turned off the light, and forced herself to sleep, though the effort left her shaken. In the days that followed, Renata barely dared to look at the mirror. She avoided spending much time in her room, and each time she passed by the dark surface, a shiver ran down her spine. She didn't tell anyone what she had experienced, fearing they'd think she was losing her mind. Despite her fear, her curiosity grew. One night, compelled by a need for answers, Renata brought a small flashlight into the room. She sat in front of the mirror, and with a mix of fear and fascination, she shined the light on the glass. Her reflection stared back at her with a distant, uncertain expression, but something in the mirror seemed different. With each passing second, the reflection's background grew hazy, as if the mirror were opening up to a dark, foggy dimension. Then, among the mist, Renata saw a shadow. It moved slowly, approaching the glass, until the blurry shape became clearer. A female figure, pale with hollow, almost empty eyes. The woman in the mirror looked like she wanted to escape, her lips moving with words Renata couldn't hear. Terrified, she took a step back, feeling a cold grip on her throat. But before she could react, the woman in the mirror extended a ghostly hand toward her, as if trying to break through the surface. "Help me!" The voice whispered again, clearer now and in a way that pierced the room's silence. Renata covered her mouth to stifle a scream, unable to believe what she was seeing. Feeling her mind on the verge of collapsing from fear, Renata turned off the flashlight, leaving the room in darkness and pulling herself away from the mirror. She knew, deep down, that this was no ordinary object. The mirror was connected to something dark, and she was being pulled into a mystery far beyond her understanding. The following night, Renata knew she had to confront what was happening. Something inside the mirror was calling to her, and despite her terror, she felt a strange compulsion to uncover the truth. Summoning all her courage, she decided to face the presence head-on. She lit a candle in front of the mirror, casting a soft light over the glass. The flickering flame created shadows in the room. somehow making the environment even more unsettling. Renata stared into her reflection, waiting, and soon the pale figure reappeared, closer and clearer than ever. The woman's face was marked with anguish, her eyes fixed on Renata as if pleading for help. Then, the woman began to speak. Her words were distorted and vague, but Renata managed to catch fragments. "I'm trapped. I need you to set me free." Renata's heart pounded faster. She leaned in closer, the figure's voice filling her mind, revealing fragments of a tragic story. The woman, as Renata soon realized, was a long-lost relative who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. Family rumors hinted that she had led a life shrouded in sadness, isolating herself in the house with the mirror as her only companion before she vanished. Renata felt a mix of compassion and terror. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The woman stretched out her spectral hand once more, pressing against the other side of the glass. "Freedom!" she whispered. Renata knew she was dealing with forces far beyond her understanding. Somehow, she was being asked to choose. Either break this connection or release a presence that might not be as benevolent as it seemed. With the candle still in her hand, Renata backed away, extinguishing the light and leaving the room, the image of the woman's face etched into her memory. She sensed that her next decision would determine not only the fate of the woman, but also her own. The following night, Renata prepared herself for a final confrontation. She knew that this would be her last chance, either free the woman or sever the bond with the mirror forever. Sitting in front of the mirror with a candle lit, she focused, feeling the air around her grow heavy and silent, as if time itself had stopped. The woman's figure reappeared, closer than ever. Renata could see every detail of her face, from the deep shadows under her eyes to the desperate gleam within them. The woman stared back at her with a blend of pleading and anguish, and this time her spectral hand began to pass through the glass. Renata took a step back, but the woman grasped her hand with a grip that felt almost real, nearly physical, and pulled her closer, her voice murmuring something indecipherable. Renata felt an icy sensation coursing through her, as if part of her were being drawn into the mirror. "Please," the woman said, her eyes pleading. "Let me live. I just want another chance." Renata struggled to break free, sensing the woman's influence growing stronger, the darkness around them intensifying. In that moment, she realized the figure wasn't just a lost soul, but a hungry presence, one that longed to take over her life. Summoning every ounce of strength, Renata broke the contact and grabbed the mirror, taking it to the fireplace. With one final look at the woman's face, which now glared back with rage, Renata threw the mirror into the fire. The flames leapt higher, consuming the dark wood frame and shattering the glass. The figure inside the mirror let out a muffled scream that echoed through the room before dissolving into the flames. Renata fell to her knees, exhausted but feeling, for the first time, that the room was free of the oppressive presence that had haunted her nights. The next day, all was silent. A sense of peace filled the air, and Renata knew that she was finally free. But the woman's face remained in her memory, a reminder of how the past can cast a shadow if not left behind. With one last sigh of relief, Renata walked away from the fireplace, extinguishing the last candle and ending the mirror's influence once and for all. The Devil's Crossing. The old folks in Willow Creek always warned the young ones to stay away from Devil's Crossing. They'd say it was a place where the devil himself came to dance under the blood-red moon. Most dismissed it as just another spooky story to keep kids in line, but those who dared to venture beyond the abandoned farmhouse swore they heard eerie howls and felt an icy chill creep up their spines. Billy Bob and Mary Jo, two teenagers with a penchant for mischief, decided to ignore the warnings and explore the abandoned farmhouse. Armed with flashlights and a healthy dose of teenage bravado, they set off one moonless night. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long, dirt road, its silhouette looming against the starless sky like a skeletal hand reaching out from the darkness. As they approached, they could hear the wind howling through the broken windows, carrying with it a strange, almost musical sound. The old oak tree in the front yard swayed wildly, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky. A shiver ran down Billy Bob's spine as he stepped over the threshold. Inside, the farmhouse was dark and dusty, the air thick with the scent of decay. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling like ghostly curtains, and the floorboards creaked ominously beneath their feet. As they ventured deeper into the house, they found themselves in a large, empty room with a fireplace at one end. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the candles they had lit. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house, followed by a series of loud bangs. Billy Bob and Mary Jo froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with fear. "I think we should go," Mary Jo whispered. Before Billy Bob could respond, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and thin, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. The creature let out a guttural growl and lunged at them. Billy Bob and Mary Jo screamed and ran, their feet pounding against the wooden floor. They burst through the front door and into the night, the creature hot on their heels. They ran and ran until they could run no more, collapsing in a heap at the edge of the woods. As they lay there, panting and terrified, they heard a faint rustling in the bushes behind them. Slowly, they turned to look, their hearts pounding in their chests. The creature was standing there, its eyes fixed on them. With a final, blood-curdling scream, it lunged. The next morning, a search party was organized to look for the missing teenagers. They found their bodies at the edge of the woods, their faces contorted in terror. The cause of death was never determined, but the locals said it was clear what had happened to them. They had ventured into the Devil's Crossing and paid the ultimate price. From that day forward, no one ever dared to set foot on the property again. The farmhouse stood empty and decaying, a haunting reminder of the evil that lurked in the darkness. And the old folks of Willow Creek continued to warn the young ones to stay away, their voices filled with dread.